This is the Brilliant Brand Show with Justin Keller, helping you fight for brilliance in your branding and marketing. The Brilliant Brand Show is powered by Circlefifty Create.
Welcome to this episode of the Brilliant Brand Show. I'm Justin Keller, your host. And on today's show, we're going to listen to a question that came in from John out of Michigan who works at a church. So let's take a listen to John's question.
Hi, my name is John Ackerman. I am the creative director at Ada Bible Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And my question for Justin is, basically, the church has had its current brand in its current state, and we feel it's dated, but we're trying to figure out the best steps forward to evaluate whether we should rebrand at this point or not. And so I'm curious about what are some of those first initial steps to determining is now the right time to rebrand, or when would be the right time to start that process?
Okay, thank you, John, for that question. I think, John, the question that you guys are facing and where you're at as an organization is where a lot of organizations find themselves after they've been in existence for a long time. And you know you need to probably do something, you need to rebrand, but what are the right steps? Where do you start? And then what would the right timing be for that? That's an important question to even start asking, just simply what would the right timing be? So I'm going to go ahead and answer that. What I would say is this. First, you need to start to figure out what's the current state of your brand. So before you even figure out the timing of when to launch a new brand, and even though you know maybe the visual part of your brand is outdated, I think that you need to look at this from a bigger picture and just start to take an opportunity right now and say, how have we evolved? What's changed? What's stayed the same? And so here's a couple things you could do. Start looking at where are we at as an organization. Start asking the question, what's working? Start asking what's not working. And you can do this by getting feedback from those who are inside of your organization, the staff. As a church, you've got a congregation that you can probably learn from, and just start talking to people and finding out who have we become and find out what are people really saying about the organization, because that's going to help you really, before you start to change a visual part of your brand, you need to get a good picture for what is the perception of our brand, not just what is the visual representation of our brand. So I would start by getting feedback. Use this as an opportunity to dive in and evaluate who are we really as an organization. I think you're going to find there's probably some things that you've always been. I think you're going to also find that there's some things that have changed, that have just evolved as time has gone on. So those are the things that you need to start to look at first and foremost. And then just start asking, have we outgrown what we once were? That's a simple starting point for a lot of organizations. It's just asking, have we outgrown the visuals? Have we outgrown the way we communicate and what we communicate with our brand? Have we become irrelevant? I think it's okay to make changes for your brand, even if it's just visually, to just be more relevant. I've got a download that's available on the resource page on justinkeller.com, and it's called Second First Impressions. And inside of that, I talk about Google and a rebrand that they went through, and it's subtle, but it's about relevancy. And you'll see inside of this, I go into depth on this, why. But one of the examples of relevancy for them in making a visual change was the increase in social media and the presence of that for a brand and how versatile they needed a logo to be. And so I talk about the subtle changes they made for the sake of versatility. So it was a really smart change, and you can go ahead and get that download at justinkeller.com. Just go to the resource section, and you'll see Second First Impressions for that. So looking at have we lost relevancy, and then again, look at the mission statements that you guys have probably written. Look at the values that you've probably got stated. Just start to consider, what are they really communicating? Is it complicated? I think this is a great time for your organization to start asking, have we complicated who we are? Have we complicated what we communicate? So when we make a visual change, let's also make a communication change that simplifies and more clearly articulates who we are as a brand. And then I think second, just asking, have we just outgrown who we were when we started? A lot of organizations start sort of by default, not really intentionality with what they're communicating and why they're communicating it. or when you started, it worked really, really well for where you were at and in the state of your organization, but you've outgrown that. And so if that's where you're at, John, it sounds like that's where you are at as an organization. I think it's a great opportunity to just look at what you're communicating. So taking a look at your mission statement, your values, a lot of times we just wrote a lot of that to start the organization because we felt like we had to. You're supposed to launch with those things. So right now would be a really good time to go ahead and look at that and say, hey, what are we communicating and why? What's the why behind everything we're communicating? If you're going to make a visual change, you should consider making a communication change as well and using this opportunity to clear up your brand message and to bring a more consistent brand message to everything that you're doing, every department, every external marketing piece, and so on. But it's going to start by knowing the why behind everything you communicate. Use this as a chance to get rid of any fluff or just bring a purpose back to everything you're communicating through this rebrand. Which leads me to the next thing is this. What problem are you really trying to solve through this rebrand? I think you need to be asking that as an organization because it's an easy starting point to say our logo is outdated or our website's outdated. But if you are just going to make a logo change or a website change, internally as an organization, that's exciting. All right, maybe your logo's terrible and it doesn't look great on the hats or the shirts that you make and no one wants to wear it. They're embarrassed to wear it. Maybe your website just doesn't have the sizzle that you see on other websites. It's not as sleek as what it needs to be. And it maybe just isn't even responsive or doesn't function right. Making that change probably affects you more internally than it does the audience externally. They're probably not going to be as excited about, hey, here's our new logo. I haven't seen a lot of organizations roll out a new logo and everybody just all of a sudden buys into the brand at a whole new level that they never were before. So my encouragement to you is this. If you know your visual brand presence it needs some work, it needs some refining, and you need to change that, use a logo change or a website change as an opportunity to launch new momentum, not just a new logo or website. And here's how I would suggest doing that. Use a visual rebrand as an opportunity to launch a more clear voice for the brand. And so make it about the purpose of the organization. And one of the ways that we do that, we roll out a new visual brand with a communication strategy that's communicating this is, even though we have a new look, this is who we've always been, this is who we are, and now we're just better representing that through our website, through our logo, through other things that you bring to life through that rebrand. So give it some purpose because that's what your audience is going to buy into is, it's not, sure, your website will be easier to use, hopefully, but they're going to buy into, man, there's a real purpose behind this. And I think that's really important, especially when you're talking about a church. And this rule doesn't apply to every organization, but churches specifically, you have donors that are giving you money. This applies to church and nonprofit, actually. You have donors who are giving you their money and entrusting you with that. If you just roll out a website and it looks like we spent a ton of money on a website and a logo, they'll just see, well, what does this really do for us? But if you roll out a more clear purpose for the rebrand and a new voice for the brand that captures who you've always been and who you are and who you'll always be, that's what they're buying into. And it's almost like the website and the logos were just necessities that had to complement what you were doing instead of the priority. So even if the priority was, hey, our logo, our website, it's outdated, it's irrelevant, the priority for your audience needs to be, hey, this is about our purpose. This is about who we've always been. This is about who we are and who we're going to continue to be. So give your brand rollout a purpose, and I think that just says a lot for your organization. It's a smarter, savvier way to roll out your brand. And so those would be my tips for you. And then the question that you also asked, John, was the timing. So there are some times of year that are probably going to look different geographically and regionally wherever you're at that might make more sense. For instance, you're calling from Michigan. I don't know that you're going to get the greatest buy-in launching something right away in January. You might want to take advantage of, the time of year when maybe in the fall the weather's a little bit better. People are, they're not on the lake in the summer, but they're also not snowed in, staying inside the house. So maybe the fall for you would make more sense for an organization. There's others who you could roll it out year long, just as long as it doesn't compete with, seasonal events. just think about the life that your people are living. Consider your audience, and when are you going to have the most people there to articulate this rollout, to engage them in this? And so the timing issue is going to look different for everybody. There are some no-nos for sure, like the end of the year, Christmas time, or Easter for a church. Probably not the best time to roll out a new name or roll out something that big. Could you roll out a new logo shortly after, or a new website? I think you should probably have that launched before. I think if you're going to start marketing Easter or Christmas, you should have already rolled out that new brand identity before your marketing hits, so they don't see one thing and then when they show up on Easter or Christmas, they're seeing something totally different, and why are they changing, and so on. So the timing issue is going to look different for everybody. So just start by looking at the lifestyle of your people, looking at the culture of your region, and just start to try to figure out, hey, when can we have the most people here, create the most buy-in, and go from there. So I hope that helps you a little bit, at least get started with where you're at. Like I said, I have a resource called First Impressions. Even if you've been in an organization for 30 years or more, you have a chance right now with the right rebrand to go ahead and make another first impression. That's why it's called First Impressions. And so that resource is at justinkeller.com. Just click on the resources. Also, my book, Rebel Brands, the 10 New Rules for Building Brilliant Brands. What I did inside of that is at the end of each chapter, there's some questions that your team could go through together. And it would go back to the first point where I was asking you to start figuring out where you're at as an organization, just figuring out the current state of your brand, and then figuring out what you're trying to solve. That will help you navigate some of that. And which leads me to, if you want a free copy of that book, it's available for you, a digital version, for anyone who submits a question for the show. So just go to circlefifty.com/Q&A, and I'll send you a free copy of that book. Otherwise, you can buy it on the resources at justinkeller.com as well. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Brilliant Brands Show. And remember, brilliance isn't complicated. Don't choose stupid.
If you would like to have your question featured on the show, just visit circlefifty.com/Q&A, and in return, we'll send you a free digital copy of Justin's book, Rebel Brands, 10 New Rules for Building Brilliant Brands. The Brilliant Brands Show is powered by Circlefifty Creative. Find your untold brilliance and make your purpose matter with the right message, visuals, and marketing. Learn more at circlefifty.com.